So how
That's
are
great.
you?
I'm tired. How are you?
Are you exhausted by life or by the travel on this movie, or?
Well, the problem is that the problem. I should be only grateful, but I'm doing the. We are promoting this movie. It's opening in a few weeks. I think in 10 days, and in the meantime, I'm wrapping my movie Suspiria. I'm prepping a new movie. I'm producing a movie, and I'm also crazily decided to become an interior designer. And so I am working on a house on the Lake Como for a client that I have.
Wow.
So I have a lot to do and a few hours to sleep.
Were you always doing this to yourself, or is this a new phenomenon?
I'm a big workaholic. I like to work a lot. Yeah.
Because you're kind of a new flavor for America. You're an overnight success here.
Well, I don't know that. I mean, I'm old enough to be grounded and to understand things in perspective. I'm grateful and happy that a movie like Call Me By Your Name get recognition and get to be beloved. Mostly because I think it's a movie that encompasses certain values that I worship, like compassion, and it's great to see the work of everybody being recognized.
So this started with the book.
Yeah.
Which did you just read it? Did somebody send it to you?
Well, the story is that I was working on I Am Love. It was 2008, and I was prepping I Am Love, and producer Peter Spears, who is my friend, and who's married to a great agent, Brian Swarstrom, who is the agent of Tilda Swinton, approached me because they optioned the book from Aciman to make into a film, and they didn't know where the book was set, because in the book it says that it's Italy, but it doesn't say exactly where. Only if you're Italian and you know the places, you can track it down. So they gave me the book and they said, can you let us understand where this is set? And I read the book with that task in mind. Of course, I enjoyed the book very much. It's a beautiful book, but my task was where it's set. And at the end, I made a little report. I realized that the book was set in Liguria. It was set on the city of Bordighera, on the border between Italy and France. And then after this consultation, they came back to me a few months later saying, we have a script, would you like to read the script? Because we need to do this movie with this director, and we want to know your advice on how to make this movie work in Italy, because it's Italian set. And so I read the script. I involved my producing partner Marco Morabito, and as producers we started to help Peter to understand how much this movie would cost in Italy to shoot for, where we made the scouting and stuff. Then that version of the movie fell apart. We couldn't find the money, and I become more and more involved as a producer into the process of trying to make it work and to make it happen. I proposed some directors, Peter proposed other directors, we approached them, some said engage, some didn't engage. It took like many years of hard walls hit before we understood that maybe there was the chance to do something, to reshuffle cards, to start from scratch. And that is when we approached Ivory, because Ivory was a friend of all of us, and we said, James, why not writing the script from scratch with me, Luca, and you, Ivory, could direct it, and we could be producing the new movie of James Ivory, which for me, I'm a cinephile, I love James' films since ever. The canon.
How did you know him in the first place?
Because we met by common friends in Rome when he was presenting White Countess. It was a very difficult moment of his life, I reckon, because Ismail Merchant had just passed away. Right. And you know that the greatness of James lies also in the bond he made with Ismail Merchant. Their banner was Merchant Ivory. Right. And also Ruth Brouwer Jabvala, the wonderful writer. So I always been fascinated by that world. And so when it comes to the possibility to produce a movie for James Ivory, I was up for it. I was so happy about it.
And he just came to mind as somebody who would have the right.
Well, I think that the kind of the capacity of Ivory to approach high literary material is almost unmatched. Right. And there was a lot about that, Italia and foreigners in Italy, the blossoming of first love. There was a lot that in a way rang very closely to his canon. So we started working on the script with Jim. It was really like almost like a moonlighting. It wasn't even a job. We worked on our kitchen, my kitchen table, his kitchen table, from Italy, New York, and then we got this script, and the script started to meet a lot of enthusiasm in the marketplace. So we thought, okay, let's make it, and we put together a budget, a schedule, all for James to direct, and we couldn't find anyone in this, that wanted to finance this version, because it was very costly, I must say. So in order to try to shrink a little bit, James asked me, would you co-direct it with me, so that maybe once you can take over when I am tired, and we can try to squeeze the way. And not even that concept worked. Nobody wanted to make a producer. Nobody believed that two personalities, such as two directors, could collaborate. But we were very eager to do that. And finally, when we hit all the avenues, and no avenues were fruitful, we understood that maybe there was a possibility for this movie to happen with me directing it at a much lower price. So we went from like $12 million to $3 million.
And what changes in the movie in that?
No changes. You know, I'm a fast director. I am no thrills, no frills. I do what I have to do.
So he has a certain way of directing that costs a little bit more.
I guess so, yeah.
Okay.
I cut my teeth working hard on very small budgets, very limited amount of time, and very limited means of expressions. And yet I tried to make the best use of it, you know? Like there is, in the great American cinema of the 70s, the New Hollywood, there is a canon of filmmakers that came out of the Roger Corman factory. Many of them, name three: Scorsese, Joe Dante, Jonathan Demme, and many, many more, Coppola. Yeah. And what was that? That was a sort of university of cinema. You go to make a movie with no money, but you have to make the best out of it in terms of expression, and it has to be commercial, and it has to communicate to a wide audience. And Corman was the greatest of all. It was very politically engaged, making the things from the left side of the political spectrum, but yet completely entertaining. I think that in a way I didn't attend that practice of filmmaking because I never worked for Mr. Corman, but I studied that canon and I learned from that, and now I know that I can pull off something in a limited amount of time and cost. In fact, with Call Me By Your Name, we had 30 days and $3.5 million, and that's how we did it.
Is there a lot of film being made in Italy that's not at those kind of prices? I mean, it seems like the budget range is starts so much lower in other countries than in the U.S. and our idea of what it costs to make a movie. That's for sure. But you have to remember a couple of things. This is not just an Italian movie. This is a hybrid co-production. It's an Italian-French co-production. We have a Brazilian investor, producer in it. We have American actors. The movie is 120-page script. It's a period drama because it is in the 80s. There is a lot of music. So the kind of movie we made with the kind of elements we made in Italy would cost 8 million euros. Yeah. And I have no idea, but you may know the answer. What budget range are the Argento movies generally?
Dario Argento?
Yeah.
You mean the one he did?
Yeah.
Or the one?
Well, what does it mean?
Well, Dario was, of course, after he got the incredible success he got with his first movie, The Bird of Crystal Plumage.
Right.
He became one of the most prominent directors in Italian cinema. The movies by Dario was produced by Salvatore, his father, until he died, and then he became produced by his brother Claudio. And I think the budget range was what could be now something between 10 and 15 million euros. So
that's a lot of money. Fairly good budgets.
Yeah, but Dario was a big director then.
So how did you start on this in the beginning? What made you? Were you a natural director from childhood, or did you wait till you were in your 20s and find this?
Oh, I was a natural director as a child. I remember watching the Argonauts. Do you say the Argonauts? Jason and the Argonauts.
Yeah. With the stop motion.
With an incredible stop motion by Ray Harryhausen. I grew up in Ethiopia. My mother is Algerian and my father is Italian, and we grew up. I was born in Palermo and moved to Ethiopia when I was 1 month old, and stayed there for 6 years until we had to be leaving the country because there was a coup d'etat and there was a dictatorship raising. But in those 6 years of my childhood, I had the privilege of living in a situation that was very different from my peers, my contemporary in Italy, I would say. And my father has always been a great cinephile, and so there was the habit that we went to the cinemas often. So I watched that film, and I watched another movie that made an incredible impact in my imagination, which is Lawrence of Arabia. Incredible. And so, from what I know from my parents, I started to say that I was going to be a director since I was like 5 years old. I got my Super 8 when I was 8. I started to film these crazy, stupid, little experimental short films with my Super 8 camera until I moved into the VHS. I did some experimental short film between my 12 and 18. At the age of 19 or 20, I filmed a documentary that on a blue-collar worker in a car factory in the north of Italy. And in doing so, I remember I traveled all the way up from Sicily to the north of Italy to get to do this interview to this guy all alone. I was like a complete filmmaker. And this short documentary was like 25 minutes. I sent it to a selection of a fringe film festival in Rome, and they selected it, and then I won. And that was it. And then this short film documentary got an article on newspaper, and it was 1992. That is when everything began for me in a sort of professional way.
And did you study? Or
No,
did you just
I
watch
never
films?
studied. I watched a lot of films, and I studied basically. My university of filmmaking has been a lot of movies, a lot of cinema, a lot of VHSs when we had VHSs, and then DVDs, Laserdisc, and then DVDs, and reading a lot of interviews to filmmakers. I thought that to hear the voice of filmmakers was for me the way to understand cinema from their perspective. I now that I am one of them reckon that we say a lot of bullshit very often, but I was never blasé, and I always believed in all the lies of directors, and this belief in their lies made me in a way capable of aiming for becoming a director. And in Italy, in the 60s, there is a publishing house that started making this monography on filmmakers. It's called Castoro Cinema, and they are like little square book like this, like little diaries, in which for one book it's one director, and they start from Anthony Mann, Howard Hawks, Alfred Hitchcock, all the way till the beginning of the 80s. And I think they may have published like, I don't know, 400 of them. And the way these books were made is half of it was cinema through the perspective of the filmmaker, so their words. And half of that book was analysis on every single movie. What I did, I read all of these books, all of them. And I was really methodical. I was trying to track down the movies, to see the movies after I read about the movies. That's how I grew up as a filmmaker. And that's why I am a little bit wary about film school. Because
that's what they would do at film school. In some ways, it sounds like you made your own film school. That's what they would, if you went to
by myself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of mistake is what you need to be going through in general in life, but in particular in cinema, because if you don't face the mistakes, if you don't face the failure of all your ideas, and you have all the proper education on technicality, usually you do something very cold or very unpersernal.
So did you go through the commercial route and all that stuff, or do any of that at all?
No,
or?
I did many commercials afterwards when I started making short film, documentaries, feature films, and only after I did my first feature film, I started to do some video clips, and then after I did, I would say I Am Love. Yeah, after I Am Love, I started making commercials.
Well, then there's real money in it.
What?
Then there's real money
Yes.
in those commercials.
Yes.
Because that's how people, I guess, a lot of directors keep their books afloat.
Exactly. You do a movie every 3 years, but thank God that there are commercials. Yes.
Yeah. So do you feel like you have a specific voice, or do you feel like it varies from film to film?
I would like to say that I am eclectic, and I would like to be eclectic, and I admire, for instance, as many of us admire the career of Mr. Kubrick. But why I admire it is because he touched every genre with a great personal point of view. And of course I admire John Ford, who himself, in doing a lot of westerns, touched a lot of genre as well. So I think that for us filmmakers, the possibility of a different way of storytelling, different emotional journey for an audience to make is a great challenge and is a great beauty, something that gives you a great sense of creativity, I would say. I don't know if I have a precise personality. That has to be said by other people, not by me. I'm a bit shy about analyzing my own work.
Well, Kubrick certainly does. And Ford is a little more rangy or sometimes not specific, but Kubrick is, even as different as his films are,
they're
always
are
Kubrick.
Kubrickian.
Yes.
Yes.
There is no question about it.
Yeah.
So is Italy your touchstone?
In which sense?
Well, I kind of wonder whether you're ever going to make a film in America. Or
Oh
make a
yeah,
film.
for sure. I think I'm wrapping Italy from Call Me By Your Name on. I'm not going to do any more movies set in Italy for a while. I did Suspiria, it's set in Germany, Berlin, in 1977. I am doing a movie next, which is a noir set in Sri Lanka and London. I have many other ideas and projects that are not set in Italy. Italy is done for me.
Just because you've done that enough that you're ready to try some other things?
I'm curious of the world.
Yeah. Are you a world traveler generally?
Mostly for work. You know, because I travel so much for work,
right,
that, I'm thinking like, what do I do during my Christmas holidays? And I was talking with my partner and my friends, and we say, oh, let's have a holiday someplace where there is heat, in Morocco or whatever. And then I said to myself, do you really want to go through custom again, airplane again, landing again, going to a hotel again, stay home? So probably my holidays is my home.
And call it a staycation now.
Yes.
So do you like traveling? Do you like doing all that stuff? Or would you rather kind of be and stay? Do you like vacationing? Is time off important?
Theoretically, I like vacationing, but then when I go on holiday, I'm very restless. So I guess I like the idea of vacationing, but not the actual practice of it.
And I guess you have so many things on your plate right now that it's almost impossible.
It's a little bit too much.
Is it surreal to come out and spend your time talking about Call Me By Your Name while you're in the middle of Suspiria and that's floating in your head?
No. I think I can swap identity quickly. I am proud of Call Me By Your Name. I love Call Me By Your Name. I love those characters, and I love the actors I worked with in doing that. And so it's always a pleasure for me to talk about that film.
Mm. But you're good at separating. So you're good at separating out.
Yeah, I
different
think
things
so.
You're doing.
I think so. I was scared that while directing Suspiria, I was thinking of Call Me By Your Name because I did it in the same year.
Right.
No, I can swap quickly.
Well, I find that with actors sometimes, a lot of the times, they'll come in for an interview, whatever, and whatever they're working on at that time is where their head is, even though they're not talking about it.
You
see,
understand.
You see the character that they're working on show up in the interview.
Yeah.
And then the next time there's somebody else. And
Yeah.
It's like a completely different energy.
Yeah.
So, was there anything scary about this film, or is it just kind of natural and everything made sense? And
About Call Me By Your Name?
Yeah.
There was nothing scary. In general, I am a quite fierce person. I try to avoid being scared by anything when I do my work. And I learned that. I wasn't like that. I was scared when I started my career making films. I was terrified by how you are exposed in front of your crew. Do you have the ideas right? Do you know what you want to do? And to avoid showing the fact that I didn't know all the answers and the fear I had for being spotted that I didn't have all the answers, I started to approach my work in a stupid way, which was like trying to cover your ass in any possible ways, cover, or be arrogant. When I learned that actually it is important that you don't know and that you have to learn how to know things and what is the real thing that you need to do, and you can relax. So I have decided not to be overwhelmed by things, let alone scared by things. There is nothing irreparable, you know?
Yeah. That's a big lesson. I think for every day it's a big lesson.
Yeah.
As you're running 5 minutes late for something and
exactly.
the world is coming to an end.
Exactly.
Yeah. So is there anything about this film that should be considered controversial, or? I mean, it's an interesting movie because there's such love for it, and then you get the sense that there's like a that is in a more conservative part of America, there will be questions about it.
I think that the conservative part of America that will have the privilege of put the prejudice at the door and go and watch this film as much as they would do in watching Moonlight or the Florida Project, I think they will be not able to articulate a perspective on this movie based on their prejudice anymore after they see it. Because the movie, I approached the movie when I started making it. I said to myself, I want to try to make an idyll. And that's it, it's an idyll, it's a summer idyll. We all went through the process of emotions that Elio goes through, every one of us. Even the most cold, detached person, in the secret of his or her own identity, they felt that aim to be recognized in the gaze of another. And even the most heinous villain has tried to be understood by another. In the failure of it may have exerted bad actions, or in the sort of drunkenness that power can get you, has forgot the fabric upon which we are built, which is interaction and transmission of knowledge between people. But I believe that the experience of being a person, it's the experience of getting to know yourself and aiming to know the other, and to reach out for the other in equality, in compassion. I think this is the movie. That's what is it about. So I found very difficult to think of this movie as carrying any controversy to it. But who am I to say that,
Is that darkness something you're interested in as a filmmaker?
Well, I would say you can say that by having seen, if you have seen any of other movies I did, sure. But I like, for instance, Suspiria is a very dark film. It's a movie that investigates what does it mean to be invested in a sort of totalitarian love, and what is the love of a mother means. And in investigating those topics, it does in a very dark way and very relentlessly terminal way. It's a very relentless film in its horror. But yet, I'm more interested in compassion, and I'm more interested in love. In working on Suspiria, I really investigated a lot the experience of the feminist art movement between 1969, 77. To name somebody, you have Judy Chicago in America, or you have Ana Mendieta, or you have Gina Pane. They were all performing, particularly with body art, very cruel representation of the boundaries between the space and the body. And I met this incredible theorician, an expert of body art called Lea Vergine, which probably is the greatest art critic specialized in that in the world. She's like 90. And trembling, I went to see her, and I asked her advice. And this was very, very early in the project, and I spoke about the horror and the body performance as an expression of horror. And she looked at me and says, "Oh, bambino," she calls me, child. That's not what it is. It was about love. And that opened up completely my consciousness about it. And I studied. I can tell you that, yes, every place of darkness, it's a place of love. There is a great book by James Ivory. It's My Dark Places, which is the account of how his mother got murdered, and the killer never got detected. And yet the urge of this book by Mr. Elroy to write this masterpiece was and is to express this longing and love for this lost mother. So I think, yeah, I like this kind of...
Well, you certainly have, I mean, I think from the films that I know, I don't know all the Italian films, but there's certainly a darkness there, but there's also, you do seem to lean to the, to love. I mean, that seems to be apparent in the work.
Hope that I come through as a humanist. Because it's too easy to put a cynical mask and to make cool films about edgy topics, you know?
Right.
I think it's a bit more complicated to try to be staying at the same level of your characters and be from their perspective, you know?
So the darkness of some people seems to be impenetrable on some level, but that's, I think it would be interesting to see you approach those characters.
Why not? Sure.
And break them down, and, you know, I think it's going to be fascinating.
For sure.
So you have all these projects going on at the same time. So none of them distract from one another? They all kind of work together?
As far as I'm concerned, I'm really precise, and I'm not making a mismatch with anybody. No.
And when you do interior design, is it cinematic?
No, because interior design, I am an expert of architecture, to be honest, and I am a bit of a pain in the ass with my production designers because I know what I want and I'm really intrusive in their job. And I do believe, what I don't like about cinema is the fiction. You know, when you go to Cinecittà in Italy or to Hollywood here in the lot, you see these buildings, and then you turn the angle, the corner, and it's all facade. That I never liked. I never been fascinated. Fellini loved that. He loved this magic world of fiction. I've honestly, of course, I use that in my work often, but I kind of not happy with that. I don't like. I like a real physical space. I believe in the real physicality of the place. So when I work in interior design, there is nothing about cinema. It's never about an effect. It's more about a lasting effect, something that has to stay forever. So if you do a house, I try to make sure that it's something about the physicality and the architecturality of it that can stay there in 100 years. It's not like covering and coloring stuff in a way that looks good for a while.
And how does somebody come to you for this, to employ you in this activity?
Because that's cool. Because I made the mistake of vanity, of accepting to portray my house in an important American magazine. So I got called after this article came out.
So they just like you. They like your taste.
That's it. It's a question of taste.
And speaking of taste, it seems to me like the hardest cast in this picture is Army. That character is everything kind of. Every character is important. They're all really critical, but Army is has to be able to play both sides of it and kind of be a superstar and also kind of be gentle and disconnected. And it seems like a very hard thing to find. Was it a hard?
Well, the balance of Oliver is so delicate because he's a sort of uncommittal until he shows that he was longing for a complete commitment. Mm-hmm. He is showing off a surface of beauty, of charm, and yet he's completely insecure of himself. He goes for a most involving, passionate love-making with someone else, and yet he withdraws from it at the end. So those balances, those nuances to be balanced was very, very, very delicate. But I remember watching Army's astonishing performances in the Social Network, J. Edgar, The Great Lone Ranger, and I was watching him and I was seeing something that was more deep than the allure of his beauty. Then when I met him here in LA 7 years ago, I found this boy, this young man, as a very cultivated, very eloquent and articulate young man that I wanted to spend time with. And when this occasion of making this movie came up to me, I felt that I had to call him for this role. In the book, everybody, all the Italians describe Oliver as the movie star, M-U-V-I.
Ah.
And I felt that was a very first good hook to cast Army, because he looks like a movie star. But then he's also this very complex, profound human being. And he displayed that in the film.
So you didn't really even have to cast him, you knew it. You just felt it.
I understood him, yes. I think I understood him. You should ask him, though.
Well, no, it's fascinating because I mean, there's so many great performances, but it feels like that's a role that if it's a little off,
It would have been
the
a
whole movie
catastrophe.
doesn't quite work.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
But he did nail it.
he did, and everybody else did, and you did, and
Thank you.
now we're here waiting for Suspiria.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you
Really
very much.
appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
I'm so glad we had this chat. I mean,